Marshall is a former CNN Science Features news producer, freelance writer. He has been researching Earth changes in Nibiru since 1999, and he sees a dark cloud coming. And noted author, by the way, several of his books, Planet X Forecast in 2012, Survival Guide, Planet X Tribulation, his latest Survival, Wellness, Advocacy, and the Big Win. We'll talk a little bit about that, too. And here is Marshall Masters back on Coast to Coast. Hello there, Marshall.
Hello, George.
Looking forward to this. How did we miss an asteroid that just buzzed by us? Did you hear that story? Oh,
yeah,
my gosh.
But you know, the one that really got my attention was Mars. They just discovered a new impact crater on Mars that was 680 feet in diameter, so that's more than 2 football fields, and it's very fresh. So this is really consistent with what we've been tracking in our meteor and bolide data. And last year, late last year, I put up a video where we really see a very high threat window for a Chelyabinsk level event this quarter, particularly in February.
And explain that meteor event that hit over Russia.
Well, that was a super bolide, which is also it's a form of a meteor.
Okay.
There's a lot of
It doesn't hit, it explodes in the atmosphere, right?
That's right. It detonates in the atmosphere. Now, a regular bolide will detonate. A super bolide will detonate, and there will be sound and flash and a shock wave. That's what happened with Chelyabinsk. So this thing was 17 meters in diameter, and I call it a 30-30 event because when it went off, it generated enough energy to equal 30 Hiroshima atomic bombs.
Oh, my God.
And was 30 times brighter than the sun. So, you know, there were a lot of people who were injured by flying glass, but there were also burns and retinal burns. And you know, one of the things that was never reported was how many people were blinded by that.
Now, since when do you start tracking fireballs? I thought you were just Mr. Planet X.
Well, what we're looking for are things that are going to be coming our way. There's a lot of folks right now doing Planet X tracking, and YouTube is just full of videos. I have never seen it so much before, and it's starting to, you know, people are just watching this stuff, and I just call it, you know, catastrophe tourism, and they're just addicted to it because there's so much reporting. But I'm really more interested in the stuff that's going to happen to us, and there I see a lot of indicators that are very serious. So when we're looking at seismic events, volcanoes, everything is on the uptick. It's very, very steady. You know, what we did in that video was we revisited the Mayan calendar date of December 21, 2012. And because a lot of people really feel burned, like they were stupid for following it. Well, that was a lot of misdirection. The Mayans were right. They weren't looking for the end of the world on December 21, 2012. They were looking for a harbinger event. They wanted their future, you know, their progeny in the future to be able to look for a very specific celestial alignment, and once that alignment occurred, then they would know that they were on the timeline of that event. And that celestial alignment occurred, and what we found when we started going back into the empirical data was we started tracking 2 data sets, meteors and earthquakes. With earthquakes, what we're finding is USGS cooks the books, and they're always downgrading them. You can
Why do they do that?
Huh?
Why do they do that, Marshall?
Well, it's to confuse the reporting. There's times that they even do not report quakes, but you'll have a 5.1 all of a sudden becomes a 4.9, a 6.2 that becomes a 5.9, you know. So they're always taking it down a notch so that they can say, well, if you look at all earthquakes of a certain magnitude, the trend is going down. Well, they're statistically suppressing the trend. So what we do with earthquakes is we just go all magnitudes. And when we're looking at all magnitudes, we're just seeing a huge uptick. Right after December 21, 2012, I mean, it's just like, you know, you've seen Coyote and Roadrunner. Coyote
Yep.
gets the Acme rocket. Well, the Coyote's on the Acme rocket, and he's going straight up, and he hasn't stopped going up. The rocket's not sputtering out. And particularly with what we're seeing now on the Ring of Fire, there's a lot of ash that's also in the air, and this is something that I predicted in my book, Being in It for the Species, that we would start seeing ash closing down airports and affecting air traffic. That's happening.
Are you saying that whatever Planet X is doing, it's bringing with it all this space clutter?
It's pulling it and pushing it. You know, it's a push. I call it a push me, pull you. And from Dr. Doolittle, because it's literally, think of it, it's got like a bow wave, and it's not only pushing stuff ahead of it that it's been dragging through space, but it's coming through and it's dislodging objects that are in benign orbits. They would never be Earth crossing. They would never be a concern. All of a sudden, they're a concern, and they have Earth crossing orbits because it's coming through the system like a huge cue ball. So that's what we're seeing with tracking meteors. And meteor observations are just skyrocketing.
This asteroid that just buzzed by us, that was, between us and the moon, it was like a 10-story building. Had that thing hit us, that would have been a catastrophe.
That would have been an extinction-level event.
My God. And they didn't see it until just a few days ago. How could they miss these things, Marshall?
Well, I don't necessarily believe that they get caught by surprise.
They just don't tell us?
They don't tell us, or actually they suppress it. I remember back in 2000, Dr. Brian Marsden of the Smithsonian Astrophysics Lab, he was the go-to guy when people discovered objects for naming them. Now, he's passed away, and very fine gentleman, but I remember talking with him. He was very furious because back then, all of the astronomers were starting to use the internet, and they'd get a sighting, and they'd say this is, has a small chance of being an Earth crosser. There could be a potential impact event, small. Well, the tabloids in England would pick that up, and then next thing you know, newspapers were going crazy with, doomsday asteroid. And what NASA did to shut all that down was they didn't deal with the media. What they did was they told all of the astronomers, you have to report this to us. We'll release the information to the public.
And the astronomers do it and stay quiet. Most of them.
If they want to keep their funding.
Right.
So that's been in place, for all this time. And I can remember back then when NASA implemented the standard or the method, astronomers were furious. But you got orthodontia for the kids. You got to pay a mortgage. That's what it comes down to.
Where would you say Planet X is right now, Marshall?
We're tracking it on the other side of the sun, and it's probably somewhere between...
Oh, I'm losing you on the phone, Marshall. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Why, I can't even hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, there you are.
Okay.
You had your hand over the speaker.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
So it's between Mars and Jupiter on the opposite side of the sun. We're in a matching orbit. It's moving around the sun much like we do, so we're slowly closing on it.
So it's kind of hidden. It's kind of hidden from us.
No, people are finding it. There's just tons of observations. This is a system, so they're spotting multiple objects in the system, and the amount of, I call it validation reporting, and I've never seen so much of it since I started this. It's just amazing. And people are spotting it. You're going to see it with objects that are, near behind the sun. You're going to catch them around sunrise or sunset because that's when the sunlight is down enough that you can see them.
Will we ever get to the point where the masses see it?
Yes.
We will.
This year.
About when?
Well, according to Ed Dames, we're going to all see it in November of this year. When we do, it's going to be about the size of the moon. And Bob Dean in 2008 made exactly the same prediction. So, the way it's coming around, the way we're seeing it right now, we're going to see it this year. We're already seeing it. The question is when are people going to believe what they're seeing?
Well, that's a big question, too, because, one, if government doesn't tell anybody about it, they're not going to believe it. It's going to come from people like you, programs like ours, in order to start getting the word out. And even at that point, some people aren't going to believe it.
Yeah, so the question really is not, when am I going to see it with my own eyes? The question is, when am I going to believe what I am seeing is a clear and present danger? That's the correct question. And, people right now they're haunting YouTube. And, it's like a old Cheech and Chong movie. They're just sitting there. And YouTube is the bong, and they've turned into tribulation couch potatoes, and they go from one video to the next, to the next, to the next. I can just see them there going, wow, man, look at this, look at that.
Far out.
Far out, dude. Don't bogart the bong. And they just think they're spectators.
All right, hang with us, Marshall. I want to get into some of your thoughts on cosmic waves and what you call validation reporting, which you're not doing anymore. We'll find out why. Okay, welcome back to Coast to Coast. Marshall Masters with us. We're talking about Planet X. We're going to take calls next hour as well. Marshall, tell me about this cosmic wave. It's somewhat historic. What exactly was it, and is it?
Well, there's a lot of debate about it, where it came from, but the helium is the one thing that a lot of people are keying in on right now. And the helium would be part of a bow wave of Nemesis, the brown dwarf at the core of the Planet X system. So we're seeing this happening. It's affecting weather on the planet. It's also going to be affecting in terms of earthquakes, volcanoes, this kind of stuff. So, we're cranking up the heat on the tea kettle here.
Okay, but in terms of a cosmic wave, what do some of these things mean to people like us on good old planet Earth? I mean, are we going to get injured? Is something going to happen?
Well, that's the question I'm asking people to start thinking about instead of validation reporting and trying to see what's coming. And that's flash flood warning in my area.
I know. Where are you? Where are you right now?
We're in Reno, and we're getting hammered by
You're getting rain in Reno?
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
It's been grueling. So, what people really need to do is they need to start thinking about all of the signs. There's a lot of suppression in the mainstream media. A lot of stuff is not being reported. We have crop failures around the world nobody knows about. How many people really know that under Naples is a supervolcano system and it's starting to go critical? There's all kinds of things happening around the globe. Folks cannot connect the dots. I'm trying to help them do it because I want them to start preparing, start getting their heads into the game. That's the problem. It's just like I look at people and they're on the bench. They're second stringers on the bench. They don't want to get in the game. And you can sit here and look at YouTube videos until the cows come home. But if you're not mentally prepared for what's coming, you're going to die badly. Your family's going to die badly. And so people think, well, okay, I'm going to go to Costco, get a bunch of buckets of free-dried food, put it in the garage, okay?
No, you're not. You're going to call our client, My Patriot Supply.
There you go.
That's what you're going to do.
But either way, if you stockpile it, you got to lug it. So you've got it in the garage. You've been telling all your neighbors about Planet X or whatever. They're all telling you you're crazy. Now the guacamole is hitting the fan. Things are really tough. Do you think they're going to walk up to you and say, well, the family's going hungry, but
they're going to take it.
Exactly.
Or try to.
That's right. So whatever you buy, you got to lug. And you may not be able to shelter in place. Shelter in place is a synonym for die in place.
How close, Marshall, does this Planet X have to get to us before it really starts bringing mayhem?
No, it really is already starting to spring it. The problem is that we don't see it, George.
I know, in all ways.
And it's,
But it will pass once it starts going away again, right? Until the next cycle.
By the time it starts passing, that's when the real dying is going to happen.
I mean, do you accept Sitchin's thoughts? It's a 3,600-year elliptical orbit?
Yeah.
You do?
And
okay.
It is a 3,600-year orbit, and it is clockwise, not counterclockwise. And that has also been maintained by Muñoz Ferrada.
Do you think
Harrington? They both said the same thing. It's in a clockwise orbit.
Do you think astronauts on the ISS see it?
There's people that are catching stuff off the ISS, but I look at it and that stuff gets sponged. You think they're going to let us see anything that's going to come off of that?
Of course not, unless it's a mistake and it leaks in.
Yeah, but, you know, the point here is that everyone's looking out there. Where you got to look is where you live, because that's what's going to kill you, not what's out there. What's out there is out there. If you got a sinkhole that opens up under you, you're dead. You're in an earthquake, you're dead. You're in a massive volcanic eruption, you're dead. People are dying around the world from earthquakes and volcanoes. The activity is really coming up. These are the things that kill. So that's what I'm really focused on right now.
All right, so give us the scenario. Tell us, in your mind, what happens as this planet now starts rumbling by.
Okay. Well, I give this in my last book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, and Being in It for the Species. I go blow by blow. It's going to come out from behind the sun. It's going to reach its point of perihelion, its closest distance to the sun. When we see it at perihelion, that's when the bad times really, really begin. Now, it's going to go from perihelion to the ecliptic because it's going to be heading south again. And when it does that, it's actually going to fly over our heads. Nemesis, the brown dwarf, is going to pass between Mars and Jupiter. And when it reaches the ecliptic, think of it as the plane of the system, the sun's equator, if you just stretched it all the way out to the signs of the constellation. When it reaches that point, then we have the days of darkness.
Because it's blotted out the sun?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, this is actually the first guy to talk about this was not me. This was first in 2004 by Major Ed Dames.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they remote viewed. And
right.
He said a large planet passes between the Earth and the sun, and it is a total blackout eclipse. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen.
How long does it blot out the sun?
It's going to be for a matter of several days. So
temperatures will plunge, I would guess, wouldn't they?
We're going to have all kinds of things, but even worse than that is that we're going to have this system that's, and when it's doing this, this is its last hurrah before it heads south. And when it's in the southern skies, that's when it's not a problem. It's only when it's in that small duration where it's in the northern skies. But when it reaches there, all of these objects, you got a bunch of planets and moons around this brown dwarf. And what they're going to do is get a lithosphere lock on the Earth. When that happens, our magnetosphere is going to ratchet down, the spin of the planet is going to slow, and then we're going to reverse direction. And so this is when we have the crustal pole shift, which means people living along the shorelines, they're all dead.
Jeez. And this happens every 3,600 years, Marshall?
Not every. The last flyby of the system was Exodus. That was the last flyby. There's a worst case and a best case scenario. Best case, that's a relative term here.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That's like talking to a probate lawyer. But in a best case scenario, when it reaches that point on the when it's coming around, heading south, reaches the ecliptic. Now, during Exodus, Earth was on the opposite side of the sun. Problem is, this time around, it's going to be more akin to the deluge, Noah's flood. We're going to be on the same side of the sun as Nemesis and its mini constellation, planets and moons. And when that happens, man, there's going to be hell to pay. And if you're not below ground, you're not going to survive.
Well, we've got almost 8 billion people plus. Not all of them are going to be below ground, that's for sure.
A lot of them will be dead before that. People ask me, the question, well, if it was something this big, they would tell us. And it boggles my mind. Where is it written in the law that the government at some point stops lying to us?
Are you going to be one of those, Marshall, and this is a rhetorical question, take it for what it is, that when this happens, you're going to say, I told you so?
No, I'm going to be too busy saving everybody I can.
Good for you.
I think that's anybody who's, by the way, if that happens and you say, I told you so, guess what people are going to do?
They're going to attack you.
Yeah, some little 60-year-old gal with a PhD is going to lunge out of the crowd, point a finger at you, and say, you're manifesting.
They're going to hit you with a baseball bat. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, or hang you, because if they kill you, then you're not manifesting it anymore, and then it's all going to go away.
So buzz through the earth changes that could occur when this happens.
Well, when the earth changes come, first thing we're going to start happening is going to be a lot of volcanic and seismic activity. We're already seeing this.
I was just going to say that.
It's already ratcheting up. Next is going to come impact events. That's going to be the next thing. Then once this thing crosses overhead, and it gets to the point where we have a lithosphere lock, that's what I call this, the gravitational pull. If the moon disappeared tomorrow, the surface of our planet would collapse 18 inches, and life would go back to single-cell animals. So during this situation, when we have the pull shift, this is going to be the biggest dieback event for the species. Then the next thing that happens is we're going to fly through the tail. This thing is dragging all kinds of iron dust and whatnot.
How big's the tail? How long?
It's huge.
Millions of miles?
It's going to take us months to transit it.
Okay.
When we do go through it, it's going to take us months. Probably, if you got people in your community that are blind, because their other senses are enhanced, they're going to smell the iron before everybody else does. When these people are saying, I can smell iron, you got to get to ground. It's starting. You need to have about 4 to 6 months of food and provisions stockpiled for that. It's going to be could be a very long transit.
Electrical power, what happens?
Well, everything at that point is going to be pretty brutal. We're going to have a lot of meteor showers, and these things are going to fall. They're going to be about the size of a boar's head, and they're going to come like a summer rain. Out of nowhere, boom.
Even one of those, the size of a boar's head, as you say, could take out a building if it hit it directly, right?
A small building, yeah.
A small building, yeah.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, we've had a period here where, there's a lot of reports worldwide of gas explosions, natural gas explosions in homes and office buildings, people dying.
You think they got hit by something?
Yeah.
If it hit the ocean, would there be a tsunami, or are they too small?
Well, it's going to drill right through the water, hit the seabed, so you're going to have an impact, depends on the size of the impactor. If you have a large impactor, yeah, it's going to generate a tsunami, but of equal importance, in both of my books, I have a scenario where we have a deep impact event off the coast of Europe, and it does a lot of damage. It hits a nexus of subsea fiber optic cables, so immediately communication.
That's gone.
Yeah, that's gone. But what happens is that when this thing hits, it creates two tsunami waves, forwards and backwards. The forward wave heads for Europe and North Africa, totally devastating. Paris and London, the water's just going to come right up the rivers and flood. But meanwhile, you have a wave that is already headed towards the United States. But it's the first of two waves that are going to hit, because something like that is going to send enough energy through the planet's crust that it's going to set off La Cumbre de Vija.
Oh, yeah.
Bahamas.
That would create a tsunami that would take out the eastern coast of the United States.
That's right. That's right. So now you have, you're going to have two tsunamis probably within a few hours of each other. It's going to be a 1-2 punch, and that's it. From British Columbia down to Florida, arrivederci. It's all gone. But, also we have the other problem on the other side in the Pacific, because, in this scenario, this thing hits on the western edge of the Eurasian plate. That's the largest plate on the planet, drives through to the eastern edge, comes out into the Pacific, and then the energy wave is directed by subsea mounts to the south, bounces off Antarctica, comes back up. So Hawaii gets nailed, Cascadia pops off, all those volcanoes up in the northwest, they're going to pop off. So it's just not going to be something where the East Coast gets hammered. The western U.S. is going to get hammered as well.
This is not pleasant, Marshall.
No, it's not. It's the reason why I want people to start thinking, because this is going to be, once this starts to unfold, it's going to be a decade-long tribulation. And you can stockpile freeze-dried food and all that, and that's great. Good for you.
You got a plan.
But that's a bridging. That's just a small bridging tool. That's enough to keep you alive until you can get something sustainable going. So my message to people right now is, what's more important than the having of things is the knowing of things. And so that is the direction we're going now. That's the reason why I just brought out my new book, Survival, Wellness, Advocacy, and the Big Win. And it'll be up on Amazon in a few days. I'm selling autographed copies now. But I also have a PDF ebook free. People just go to my site, knowledgemountain.org, and they can download it anonymously. And I'm just trying to get people to, George, they got to get some skin in the game. They got to get off the bench.
Nobody will react, Marshall. Nobody will react until something major happens, and then people will panic like you've never seen it before. That's the way humankind is.
I know.
And FEMA's not ready. FEMA's not ready for this. Poor Donald Trump coming into office. He's not going to be ready for this.
You know what, dollars to donuts? I think Trump knows a lot more about this than he lets on.
You think so? How?
Yeah. I think he would know about something like that.
Were you an advisor?
I wish, from your lips to God's ears. No, I just, it's, call it a gut instinct. That's it.
All right, Marshall, stay with us. We're going to come back for an hour of phone calls with you before I go into open lines later on tonight here on Coast to Coast AM. Marshall Masters with us. His websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. His latest book is called Survival, Wellness, Advocacy, and the Big Win. I got to ask him what the big win means, and we'll find out when we come back. Also, don't forget to like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, because during open lines, we'll take some of your tweets and your texts as well right here on Coast to Coast AM, where you can also email me at george@coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. In this hour, we're going to take your phone calls with Marshall Masters about Planet X. We'll be doing that in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast. Marshall Masters with us. Marshall, how did you get started in this in the first place? What happened?
Oh, you just walk backwards into it. There's no degree program in college for Planet X. I was just trying to figure out global warming. And so this was back in 1999, and I got together with a couple other folks in Mensa, the three of us put our heads together, and we started researching it, and we were curious, was something similar happening to the other planets in our system? And when we looked at anything that had an atmosphere, it was showing evidence of the same things. And so we found it indirectly that way, and it was like, is this a natural cycle of the sun? We couldn't determine that, so it had to be an interloper. Then the next question is the interloper a rogue? Is it passing through the system, or is it in a captive orbit? And so we went through the whole process, step by step, of breaking it down and finding what explained everything. And it does. It all goes back to it. And, the thing is that we did that. Other people have done that. There's a lot of suppression right now. Your listeners can go and get on Google, Yahoo, or Bing, type in Planet X or Nibiru, and just see how many screens you got to drill down before you see me or someone like Nancy Leader, who's incredibly prolific. And so they're controlling this conversation. People can't get the information. And this is what really, it pisses me off. It has pissed me off.
Radio. All right.
I'm sorry. And it's just, I understand what they're doing. If people are not vigilant, if they don't see what's coming, George, they're going to die in place, or shelter in place. Same difference. What do they want to do? Well, look at the Georgia Guidestones. It says keep the population under 500 million. Doesn't say how we get there. But this is how we get there. We're going to have this global catastrophe. And during this Planet X flyby, something amazing is going to happen. The shackles of slavery on our species, and we are a slave species, the shackles are going to come off. And we're going to be dying in vast numbers. 9 out of 10 are going to die. But they will die as free men and women. So my focus is on the survivors. And the big win, the end game, is defeating what the elites want to do, to reshackle us back into slavery, towards the worst of it. Earlier we talked about passing through the tail. Well, that's when we're at the end of that. That's when this is going to happen. That's when the seed vaults are going to open up. They're going to come up with food, medicine, clothes, construction materials. All you got to do is agree to their terms, which will include taking the RFID tags. And those tags, by the way,
the sign of the beast is coming.
They are. Because
so prophecy
these things are operating at multiple frequencies. They're very robust. This is intelligence that I have from someone who blew the whistle. And these things are designed, they found the frequency by which we feel a cosmic relationship with Creator. You know, you do feel a sense of the presence of God. Well, you get tagged with one of those chips, they're going to block that frequency. And then they're going to replace it with whatever they want God to be. That's how insidious this is. And they want a lot of people to die. So when I write my book, The Big Win, to me the big win is if we just called bluff, and that only takes three things: self-sufficiency knowledge, hope for the future, and knowing you're not alone. That's it. That's my whole bag right now.
And you know they want to reduce the population down to 500 million. That's the number we keep hearing.
Yes, because it makes sense, George. If you only have so many trinkets to go around, okay, and you have enough of a supply that it could be meaningful for people. If you have 7 billion people, you know, what, a day or two? That's it. So who's going to sign their life away for a day or two? But if there's enough, yeah, all of a sudden, you know, there's a lot to go around. And if you get in on this, okay, so people are going to make a bad deal. They're going to take the chip. They're going to sign away their rights. And the elites will reestablish slavery control. The big win is it's easy. It's easy. When they make the play, people say no. They pull a Gandhi. We're just not going to participate. No, thank you. They're going to understand it's not no to the carrot. It's going to be no to the stick. And it doesn't need to be the majority of the survivors. It only took 30% of the colonists here in the United States to win the revolution. The other 70% either sat on the sidelines or played ball with the British. All we need is a critical mass, or in other words, the 100th monkey. So that's my whole bag right now. That's what I'm writing about. That's the information I'm trying to get out there. I don't know if I'm going to survive the tribulation, but I just know that when my day comes, and I'm standing before my God, warts and all, we'll both know I kept the faith. And I'm just trying to give people a plan, an idea. I'm not talking to the 90% that are going to die. I'm sorry about that. I really am. I've lived with the burden of that misery, and it has been a terrible weight on my shoulders. Continues to be.
One last thing before we get into calls here, Marshall, and that is validation reporting, which has been so important to this. You used to do that. You don't anymore. Why not?
Because I would just be one small voice in a big chorus. So, great. Let the chorus go on without me. I can focus on what's really important. I'm trying to help the people who I know are going to be the most likely to survive. And it's not the one building $500,000 bunkers.
Well, that's true. All right, let's go to the phones. Thomas in La Jolla, that's in California. He's on the wild card line. Thomas, go ahead.
George, thank you for taking my call, and Marshall Masters, thank you for the research. This is a very sobering interview, to say the least. For many, many years, decades, in fact, there have been rumors that the planetary elites have been building deep underground militarized bases. By deep, I mean at least a mile underneath the surface. Yep. For planning for a flyby, and of course a flyby would include kinetic impact of asteroids, meteors, collateral material, and also protection against massive electrical phenomena discharging between Planet X and the surface of planet Earth, which would create, as George knows, electromagnetic pulse, which could possibly fry, the electronic circuits. My question is, there is some debate that a deep underground militarized base, at least a mile underneath the surface, may be the worst place to be during a flyby because of seismic effects. They may turn into deep underground tombs, so to speak. And I was wondering what your thoughts, your speculations, reflections on this. Would it be better to be on the surface or perhaps underground shallowly? Or would the deep underground bases, are those the best places to be? And thank you again for the work that you're doing,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Masters, and thank you again, George.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Marshall.
Well, the deep underground military bases, Phil Schneider was the guy that blew the whistle on that. He's a hero.
The late
they
Phil
go down
Schneider.
2 miles deep. Pardon?
The late Phil Schneider.
Yeah, the late Phil Schneider. And, I had the privilege of watching all of his YouTube videos, which are a little harder to find these days. But these deep underground bases, and they have a network of them, they're interconnected. What I can tell you is they started this program several decades ago, and what they did not anticipate when they made their grand plan for these deep underground bases was sinkholes. This is something that is new. They didn't anticipate that, and it's very scary for them because you have a sinkhole opens up above or below one of these deep underground military bases. That's it. I don't care how sophisticated it is. It's going to collapse. It's going to be a problem. So I don't think the elites are going to do as well underground. I think that they're going to have a pretty high death ratio down there. In terms of the surface, I actually, in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I talk about shelters that can be built rapidly and are going to be strong enough. And in that, I'm talking about a layered sandwich of about 12 feet of dirt and 2 feet of basalt. And so the basalt has paramagnetic qualities, so it's a radiation shield. Now, 5 feet of dirt is going to give you EMP protection, such as an airburst nuclear event. But we figured more to about 12 to 15 feet, and the style of construction I put in there, and I actually focus on, there's a fellow by David South, Monolithic in Texas, and his system is utterly brilliant. It's perfect for this. These things can go up very rapidly, and so I see, when we see on CNN the talking heads telling us, yeah, everybody sees it, don't worry, it's just going to be an interesting light show. When you hear that, the last window of opportunity to do something has arrived. And if the next time you see them on CNN going, well, we didn't anticipate all of the things that happened, but we've corrected our models and don't worry, then the window of opportunity is closed.
It's gone, yeah.
So I tend to think of process. I'm not date-driven. So, what he's talking about with the deep underground bases, they're not going to do well, and I don't think they've anticipated all the things that are going to come into place, particularly with the lithosphere lock. And also, let's be honest, when we see private jets littering the tarmac at Denver International like a bad case of the measles, dying time is near.
Next up, we go to Vicki, first-time caller in Duluth, Minnesota. Hello, Vicki. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for answering my call.
Sure thing.
Can you hear me all right?
We sure can.
Okay. I want to go back to, my question is, I am only a couple blocks from the big lake, Lake Superior. And, I can look down at the lake. I'm wondering when Marshall talked about the first wave hitting Europe, second wave hitting the East Coast, will that come up to St. Lawrence Seaway into the big lakes, push all the water up?
There'll be some of that, but more importantly is when we have the pole shift event, that's when it's really going to be bad. So you don't want to be anywhere near those lakes. Usually what we're talking about is about 150 miles away. You know, if you were going to northwest Minnesota, at the other side of Red Lake, up in that northwest corner, that's where I would head when things are getting bad. That's a good area, highly survivable. And there are other areas in the country like north of Asheville and North Carolina. So these are places you want to keep in mind. But where you're located right now, hard to say, you know, how much of the water is going to come through the seaway, but definitely during the pole shift, not going to be a good thing.
Marshall, in your latest work, Survival, Wellness, Advocacy, and the Big Win, what is the big win?
The big win is we come out of this a free species and we have a Star Trek future.
With how many people?
Well, you know, during the tribulation, it's going to be a period of about 10 years. The population will be whittled down pretty hard. But we're going to rebound. And I think by the end of the tribulation, while at the worst of it, we could be down to 500 million. By the end of it, after the last shaking and rattling and the earth trumpets and all of that, we'll have 1.5 to 2 billion.
Will the lifestyles of the people then be what it is now, or will they be back to the Stone Ages?
No, I don't think we're going backwards. I think we're going forwards. I have hope for the future. I have, you know, people are going to be free. I mean, George, this is going to be an exciting time. It's going to be painful, but on the other hand, it's going to be exciting. You know, think about all of the fantastic inventions we've heard about, the carburetors that give 100 miles to the gallon and things like that. And what happens? Some special interest sends the government goons down to shut the guy down, take all his research, make his life miserable. Well, what happens if there's nobody to stop our Nikola Teslas from popping up everywhere? And they will. You know, one of the things I talk about is in the book is that we're going to see what I call an alternet. The Internet is the infrastructure of the Internet is just going to be hammered. It's just not going to get back on its feet for a very long time. But people are going to find a way to communicate with what I call an alternet. Now, they're going to need equipment to do that. They can get old laptops working and things like that, but they're going to need a new way. It's a mesh network where, messages don't go into Google and then back out to somebody, but everything's passed along from one computer to the next. It's called a mesh network. You know, and people think, well, great, I can't go to Costco and buy a mesh network modem today. You don't have to. We have millions of mesh network modems all over the country.
Hold on, Marshall. We're coming back for final calls in a moment. And welcome back to Coast, back with Marshall Masters, back with your host. And Marshall, do I understand this right? You're making your new book available on Kindle and PDF ebook for free? Is that what I understand?
Yes, it's free, and you can download it from my site, knowledgemountain.org. I have a PDF, and you can just import the PDF into your Kindle reader. It looks nice, reads well, and so it's a nice universal format. And, earlier I was saying about the Alternet, and people would be surprised where the enabling technology is going to come from for that to happen, because that's going to be a big freedom tool. We already have it, and when you read the book, it'll blow your mind, and you can get it for free. Just go to yowusa.com or knowledgemountain.org, download it, enjoy it. It'll give you hope for the future. You know, the thing about it is the elites want you to think you're set up to fail, that we can't make it, all right? And it's all just, mind tricks. The fact is that all we have to do is three things: self-sufficiency, knowledge, hope for the future, and knowing we're not alone. And if we can do those three things, George, we got a Star Trek future. But if we let them trick us into thinking that they've got us over a barrel, then we go right back into slavery. And that's what I'm fighting against right now. That's it. That's my whole raison d'etre.
When you started talking about this, Marshall, what did your family think?
Well, we don't talk anymore. That's the problem with this.
It's not easy.
Open up to this, you don't have a lot of conversations. There's one of the things that whistleblowers have told me over the years, and it's like to a man, to a woman, they always say the same thing. Now I know how Noah felt.
Yeah.
You know, so you're telling people they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear bad news. So, but I know what I know. When you're in awareness, you know what you know. And, you know, I see a lot of people out there that are in awareness, and, you know, they got denier spouses that make their lives miserable. You know, they're saying, you stop doing this or I'm going to divorce you. They're always threatening the nuclear option. And it's a terrible thing, but once your eyes open up to this stuff, there is no going back.
Is this a United Nations effort here, Marshall, under the table? I mean, do all these countries know about it on this planet?
Yeah, and they're preparing in different ways. Look at Russia. They're building underground bunkers like crazy for their population. Sweden has enough for its entire native population. The Scandinavian countries are very good at it. The United States, they're buying coffins and bullets.
Not good.
Not
Let's
good.
go to Ken in Kingman, Arizona. Hey, Ken, go ahead, sir.
Well, hi, George and Marshall. I feel like I met my brother. So much of what he's talked about tonight, exactly what's been going on for me the last 15 years. I do have a question. The USDA has been projecting a 9.0 earthquake in California, especially on the Cascadia. And do you have a timeline for that tied into your Planet X stuff? Because what I'm worried about is roving bands of refugees, and I've been reading a book lately called The Loss of Civility, How to Survive a Total Breakdown of Society, written by two spec operators, how to do it with your family, your friends, and your neighbors.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's one of the things that earthquakes, there's absolutely no way to predict with any certainty, but the pressure is building. Okay, so we're getting hit. The Earth is responding to the sun, which is responding to Planet X, and it's warming up on the inside. You know, what Edgar Casey was saying is actually right. He had the process right, but we just wound up on a different timeline, and things are playing differently. And the universe
and hence people think he was wrong, but you're saying he may have been right.
Correct. And I'm saying that he was right about the process, and that's the reason why I'm process-focused. I'm looking at how are the dominoes falling. I don't care how long it takes for the dominoes to fall. I just want to see how they're falling, and right now they're falling. And what this man is talking about, George, I can tell you here in Reno, this is one of those topics that people are in awareness just dread, because they're going, my God, what are we going to do when, 10 million Californians come streaming down interstate, coming down the interstate?
I think rush hour's bad now out there.
Oh, yeah. See, there's no rent control here. So the first thing that will happen is the refugees are going to pay 3 to 4 times a month rent for the same places. So we're going to see, because there's no rent control, we'll see crooked lawyers putting up billboards everywhere around town saying, we'll get them out, we'll get them out. And so native Reno folks are going to get kicked to the curb.
But you're saying whatever's going on with Planet X is happening now. Unlike some people who say it's coming, it's going to happen, you're saying things are happening now.
Absolutely. We're tracking all of the data. If you just, if your listeners just go to my website and watch my video, Signs number 13, and I show them the earthquake and the meteor activity since December 21, 2012. And interesting thing is we just got in the most current for December of last year. And it's still, the trends are still month over month, year over year, it's still increasing. So it's only a matter of time before we have a Chelyabinsk incident, again, another Super Bowl light. But, George, what happens if we have a Chelyabinsk directly over Los Angeles, releasing 30 Hiroshima atomic bombs worth of energy?
You're talking about catastrophe beyond anything I could even imagine.
Yes, yes. And that is exactly, and this is empirical data that we're tracking. We're not talking to ETs, and we're not speculating on, we're going simply with hard evidence you can take to the bank. And I present that in the video. I also present something for people that they can do to help protect themselves if they are in the vicinity of a Chelyabinsk event. And it's very, very simple. So, and I explain to them the terminology. It's real important. People, if you go and you start looking on the Internet, what's the difference between a meteor, a meteorite, a fireball, a bolide, and all of that? It's like Harry Truman said about economists, lay them all end to end, they point in every direction. And so I took some of the mystery out of that so people could focus in on the real key terms they need to be mindful of. So if they do get reported, they know what to hone in on.
Next up, we go to Eddie in El Paso, Texas. Eddie, it's your turn.
Well, thank you, George. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, you're very welcome.
And Mr. Masters, thank you for your hard work and your information that you're putting out there. Sir, I'd like to ask you, in regards to, you talked about all the calamities that were going to happen as far as pole shift, meteorites, so forth. Do you think, just two questions. First question is, do you think we would be safer underground shelters? And due to the fact, because, obviously we'll lose our power grid and everything, and we have to worry about our power plants melting down with radioactivity, among all that. But also on the North Pole and the South Pole, would it be, as far as intensity of these calamities, would it be less on the North Pole or South Pole? And I'll take my answer off the air, George. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing. Go ahead, Marshall.
I think that in general, people just need to be able to have a plan B that's going to get them to a relative area of safety. Here's some guidelines I can give to somebody, just some rules of thumb. You want to be 150 miles away from any major body of water, Great Lakes, oceans. In terms of nuclear plants, we're going to have Fukushimas all across the country. If you think Fukushima is an atomic volcano and they can't turn it off, and it's killing the Pacific. But we're going to have that same problem here. So you got to look for your prevailing winds. So wherever you're going to locate yourself for your plan B, you want to be at least 50 miles upwind of a nuke plant and 100 miles downwind of it. Then the other things that you want to look for besides elevation, and you don't want to go too high because you want to be at an elevation where you can do farming. We're going to go back into an agrarian age, so stay under 5,000 feet. But what you want is soft soil, rolling hills, and lots of clean water. And I'm talking about deep, deep wells. That's really going to be important, especially when we have that last phase where we're passing through the tail of the Planet X system, because the iron, that dust that's going to fall everywhere, is going to just make surface water a nightmare. Now, eventually that'll clear out with the exception of swamps and sloughs and things, but during that period of time, you're going to need to have water. So those are the basic rules of thumb. In terms of construction, my advice is that you build above ground so you're not into a water table. You don't excavate. You build above ground next to a side of a hill, and then you backfill from the hill, and that's how you get your 10 or 12 feet of protection. But people are also going to find other ways to be safe. They're going to railroad tunnels, parking garages. Folks are going to be innovative. The ones that I believe are going to be the best able to organize are going to be faith-based organizations. So that's the reason why my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, talks to faith-based leaders. And they're going to be the ones that are going to march to the beat of a different drummer. They're going to see a clear and present danger. And they're going to get their flocks to safety. These are the people you want to find. These are the people you want to work with. They're the ones that are going to be most capable of creating viable communities. And those are the general ideas that I'm throwing at it. As far as it goes for the people that have built these, expensive bunkers for $500,000, $1 million, they're going to be fine for a year or two. Then when they come up to the surface to forage, they're going to be strangers in a strange land, and predators will just take them out. They'll be hunting them. And so that's why I call them bunker bunnies. So, again, it's not about the having of things, it's the knowing of things, and that's what I'm trying to get across to people.
Let's go to Mike in Auburn, Washington now. Thanks for calling, Mike. Go ahead.
Hi, George. How you doing?
Good, Mike. Thank you.
And hello, Marshall.
Hello.
Well, I have a question for you. I believe earlier on you were talking about something was going to happen in February. Was that a comet or something like that, some kind of explosion? I forget what it was you were starting to say and then got sidetracked into something else. That's my first question.
What we're seeing for the first quarter of this year is a very, very high probability of a Chelyabinsk level event somewhere in the world. And the month of February, statistically, is when it's most likely to happen. Keep in mind that Chelyabinsk happened on February 15th, 2013. And on that very day, everybody was looking in the other direction because NASA was talking about another asteroid that turned out to be a non-event, and they were completely blindsided by Chelyabinsk.
Okay, and my second question is, if you were me and you lived in the Seattle area, where would you want to go when this stuff really starts to hit the fan? Where would you want to vacate to, and how would you really do it if you don't really have much money to relocate, buy property, that kind of stuff?
And not a lot of people do either.
Not a lot of people do. I would head east of Lake Roosevelt.
East
of Lake Roosevelt.
How far east? As far as you could go.
As far as you can.
Yeah. Don't look back, right?
That's it. So it's a tough thing. I mean, it's hard for people. Relocating, it's why I call it busting a move, because you bust up your life. And, then you have your whole family that they think you're as crazy as a peach orchard boar. And it's difficult. So, the best thing to do is to have your bug out strategy. You want to be able to get out of Dodge in time to give yourself an advantage. So again, going back to when you see the talking heads on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, because they're propaganda channels, they're controlled by the elites. When you see them saying, "Oh yeah, we see it, everybody sees it, but it's just going to be an interesting light show. Don't worry about it," that is your bust of move day. That's it. When you hear that song and dance, you just do it. You just do it. And if your family's going to think you're crazy and you're overreacting.
Well, they probably will.
Yeah, they probably will. And you know what? Good buddy, you wouldn't be the first one. And the ones that I really, really, my heart goes out to. And that's the reason why survival wellness advocacy and the big win. You think about, who do I want to help the most? And it's the people I've heard crying on the phone so many times. Grandparents who have children with minors and that are grandchildren, and they're trying to get their children just to look at stuff, and the kids are living in ground zero areas like Los Angeles, and they're going, "Mom, you're crazy. We're staying here. Our life is here." And then these parents, these grandparents, they have a death wish scenario. Do they stay with their children and grandchildren so that they can die with them and comfort them? Or do they try and do something that they can provide a safe path out for their progeny? And that is a big reason why I wrote Survival Wellness Advocacy and the Big Win. I'm trying to help these people that I've heard crying on the phone so many times. And I mean, they cry. It's torment and agony. Torment and agony.
Do you anticipate some kind of an asteroid or meteor situation soon?
I think this year, yeah. It's just when I look at the empirical data, but also look at all of the buzz we're hearing out of the government about they're discovering asteroids all of a sudden. They're out there pumping up the dialogue, and that's what I hear. There's a lot more chatter going on. They're talking about this in a more serious vein than I've heard in years. And so, it's, to say exactly when it's going to happen, who knows? But to me, it's an Amtrak proposition. Amtrak. They don't get there on time, but they eventually get there.
They sure do. Marshall, we are out of time. Keep in touch with us with your work, your incredible work about Planet X. Welcome back to Coast to Coast. Marshall Masters with us for a couple hours. Marshall is a former CNN Science Features news producer, freelance writer. He has been researching Earth changes in Nibiru since 1999. And he sees a dark cloud coming, and noted author, by the way, several of his books, Planet X Forecast in 2012, Survival Guide, Planet X Tribulation, his latest, Survival Wellness Advocacy, and The Big Win. We'll talk a little bit about that, too. And here is Marshall Masters back on Coast to Coast. Hello there, Marshall.
Hello, George.
Looking forward to this. How did we miss an asteroid that just buzzed by us? Did you hear that story? Oh,
yeah,
my gosh.
But the one that really got my attention was Mars. They just discovered a new impact crater on Mars that was 680 feet in diameter, so that's more than 2 football fields, and it's very fresh. So this is really consistent with what we've been tracking in our meteor and bolide data. And last year, late last year, I put up a video where we really see a very high threat window for a Chelyabinsk level event this quarter, particularly in February.
And explain that meteor event that hit over Russia.
Well, that was a super bolide. which is also a different. It's a form of a meteor.
Okay.
There's a lot of.
It doesn't hit. It explodes in the atmosphere, right?
That's right. It detonates in the atmosphere. Now, a regular bolide will detonate. A super bolide will detonate, and there will be sound and flash and a shock wave. That's what happened with Chelyabinsk. This thing was 17 meters in diameter, and I call it a 30-30 event because when it went off, it generated enough energy to equal 30 Hiroshima atomic bombs.
Oh my God.
And was 30 times brighter than the sun. So, there were a lot of people who were injured by flying glass, but there were also burns and retinal burns. And, one of the things that was never reported was how many people were blinded by that.
Now, since when do you start tracking fireballs? I thought you were just Mr. Planet X.
Well, what we're looking for are things that are going to be coming our way. There's a lot of folks right now doing Planet X tracking, and YouTube is just full of videos. I have never seen it so much before, and it's starting to, people are just watching this stuff, and I just call it, catastrophe tourism, and they're just addicted to it because there's so much reporting. But I'm really more interested in the stuff that's going to happen to us. And there I see a lot of indicators that are very serious. So when we're looking at seismic events, volcanoes, everything is on the uptick. It's very, very steady. What we did in that video was we revisited the Mayan calendar date of December 21, 2012. And because a lot of people really feel burned, like they were stupid for following it. Well, that was a lot of misdirection. The Mayans were right. They weren't looking for the end of the world on December 21, 2012. They were looking for a harbinger event. They wanted their future, their progeny in the future to be able to look for a very specific celestial alignment, and once that alignment occurred, then they would know that they were on the timeline of that event. And that celestial alignment occurred, and what we found when we started going back into the empirical data was we started tracking two data sets, meteors and earthquakes. With earthquakes, what we're finding is USGS cooks the books, and they're always downgrading them. You can see
why do they do that?
Huh?
Why do they do that, Marshall?
Well, it's to confuse the reporting. There's times that they even do not report quakes, but you'll have a 5.1 all of a sudden becomes a 4.9, a 6.2 that becomes a 5.9. So they're always taking it down a notch so that they can say, well, if you look at all earthquakes of a certain magnitude, the trend is going down. Well, they're statistically suppressing the trend. So what we do with earthquakes is we just go all magnitudes. And when we're looking at all magnitudes, we're just seeing a huge uptick. Right after December 21, 2012, it's just like, you've seen Coyote and Roadrunner. Coyote gets the Acme rocket. Well, the Coyote's on the Acme rocket, and he's going straight up, and he hasn't stopped going up. The rocket's not sputtering out. And particularly with what we're seeing now on the Ring of Fire, there's a lot of ash that's also in the air, and this is something that I predicted in my book, Being in It for the Species, that we would start seeing ash closing down airports and affecting air traffic. That's happening.
Are you saying that whatever Planet X is doing, it's bringing with it all this space clutter?
It's pulling it and pushing it. It's a push. I call it a push me, pull you, and from Dr. Dolittle, because it's literally, think of it. It's got like a bow wave, and it's not only pushing stuff ahead of it that it's been dragging through space, but it's coming through and it's dislodging objects that are in benign orbits. They would never be Earth crossing. They would never be a concern. All of a sudden, they're a concern, and they have Earth crossing orbits because it's coming through the system like a huge cue ball. So that's what we're seeing with tracking meteors. And meteor observations are just skyrocketing.
This asteroid that just buzzed by us, that was, between us and the moon, it was like a 10-story building. Had that thing hit us, that would have been a catastrophe.
That would have been an extinction-level event.
My God. And they didn't see it until just a few days ago. How could they miss these things, Marshall?
Well, I don't necessarily believe that they get caught by surprise.
They just don't tell us?
They don't tell us, or actually they suppress it. I remember back in 2000, Dr. Brian Marsden of the Smithsonian Astrophysics Lab, he was the go-to guy when people discovered objects for naming them. Now, he's passed away, and very fine gentleman, but I remember talking with him. He was very furious because back then, all of the astronomers were starting to use the internet, and they'd get a sighting, and they'd say this is, has a small chance of being an Earth crosser. There could be a potential impact event, small. Well, the tabloids in England would pick that up, and then next thing you know, newspapers were going crazy with, doomsday asteroid. And what NASA did to shut all that down was they didn't deal with the media. What they did was they told all of the astronomers, you have to report this to us. We'll release the information to the public.
And the astronomers do it and stay quiet. Most of them.
If they want to keep their funding.
Right.
So that's been in place, for all this time. And I can remember back then when NASA implemented the standard, or the method, astronomers were furious. But you got orthodontia for the kids, you got to pay a mortgage. That's what it comes down to.
Where would you say Planet X is right now, Marshall?
We're tracking it on the other side of the sun, and it's probably somewhere between...
I'm losing you on the phone, Marshall. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Why, I can't even hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, there you are.
Okay.
You had your hand over the speaker.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about
So it's between Mars and Jupiter on the opposite side of the sun. We're in a matching orbit. It's moving around the sun much like we do, so we're slowly closing on it.
So it's kind of hidden. It's kind of hidden from us.
No, people are finding it. There's just tons of observations. This is a system, so they're spotting multiple objects in the system, and the amount of, I call it validation reporting, and I've never seen so much of it since I started this.